Hey guys, this is Pennywash from Gamer Fusion, and I'm going to be making a video to go along with the second lesson in the tutorials that I have posted on the website. So this one introduces functions and comments. So I'll be demonstrating the use of them in this video. So if you haven't noticed already, I already have my new project created and my source file added. And I've included the basics for a program that's outputting text to the screen. And instead of using the int main, I'm using a void main simply because void returns no value, so I don't have to type in return 0 like this for an int. I don't have to use that. Voids don't return anything, so don't worry about that. So since we're coding using functions, why don't you go ahead and code in a cout statement that says you are currently in main. And let's go ahead and add a new line to that. And now I'll talk a little bit about functions. So what you're going to do is, let's just code a function that outputs text. So let's make it a void. It doesn't have to return anything. And let's call it print statement. And then you have your arguments and parameter list right there. And let's put in our opening and closing brace. So every function has these. Main's its own function, so it has those. And any function that you create, which is called a user-created function, is going to have these as well. So now let's just output a cout statement saying you are currently in print statement. And you can also use endl. And I forgot to do this, but go ahead and add in using namespace std. So that'll keep you from having to type in std::: all the time. I always do that just because I don't like typing that, and it becomes a little vigorous after a while. So now let's go ahead and call our function. So when you're calling a function, you just type in the function name and your arguments list. And ours has nothing here, so it's a void. And you end it with a semicolon. And now for an introduction on comments, you have double slash comments, which just comment out on the single line that you're on. So I'll just call this call to print statement. And when you go on a new line, the text disappears and it turns back to black font, which means you're going back to your regular programming. And you also have /* and */ comments, which look like this. So if I compile this right now, since it's commenting out all of this, the compiler will completely ignore this, and I'll receive an error about it having no entry point. So let me just do that real quickly. It has a linking error, entry point must be defined. So whenever you comment something, the compiler completely ignores it. So just take note of that. And that can also be useful for blocking out large amounts of code. It's what I do when I'm debugging and I want to use another function or something. And so if I compile and run this, what's going to happen is first you'll see cout you're currently in main, and then I will see you are currently in print statement. And just to make sure that it's working, why don't we just cout another statement to show that you're out of the function. So cout you are back in main. And let's end the line. So let's compile and run it. And it's working correctly, as you can see here on line 12. It prints out you're currently in main. Then it jumps ahead to line 14, where you make a call to print statement, which goes up here and takes print statement and does what the function's supposed to do. And then on line 16, it prints out you're back in main. So now the way that this function's coded, this isn't the way people normally code it. If you're new to programming, you can code it this way, but note that eventually you'll want to move to function prototypes. So when you're using a function prototype, I'm just going to cut this out. You define the prototypes up here. So I'm just going to do it right here. Function prototype. And you just type in the name of the function, what type it is, and the parameter list. So for our function, it's going to look void, print statement, your parameter list, which is empty, followed by a semicolon. So whenever you're using a function prototype, you always end it with a semicolon right here. If you don't, you'll end up getting compiler errors, so we don't want that. And now if I just paste the code that I cut out earlier, you'll see it down here. And if I compile and run this program, it will do the same thing it did before. So there you go. So using function prototypes makes your code a little bit cleaner. You can show main up here. You can collapse the rest of the statement, so makes it a lot easier to handle and a lot easier to debug. Now let's code a function that's going to do a basic addition problem. So why don't we do this? Let's make it an int, so it's of type int, so it'll return an int, and call it addfunc. And in the parameter list, let's have two ints, an int x and an int y. So that's your parameter list, and these are called formal parameters. If something's a formal parameter, you can name it anything you want, and it doesn't matter. And the other type of parameter is called an actual parameter, which I'll explain in a couple of seconds. So why don't I just redo this bottom part here just too. Int addfunc, and the parameter list, it shows up with IntelliSense. It's int x and int y. And note down here that there's no semicolon, it just has an opening and closing brace with the function statements here. So in void main, let's get rid of all this because we don't need it anymore. And let's create a couple of ints, an int x, int y, and int z. And let's have predetermined numbers. But first, let's code our function. So what this is going to do is it's going to add x and y together, and it will return that value. So let's make a... actually, you don't need to do anything. So all this needs to say is return x plus y. And it'll return whatever x and y are added together. So now you have an int x, an int y, and an int z. So let's do x, let's make x equal to 5. And let's make y equal to 7. And let's make z equal the add function of x and y. So this is your call to addfunc. And now let's just see out z. So now if you run the program, what's going to happen is it'll just output the value of 5 plus 7. And it says 12, so 5 plus 7 is 12, which is returned by this function down here. And the x and y over here are called your actual parameters, so these are the actual items that are getting sent into it. And just so I can make this a little more clear, in our cout, let's modify it to say x and y added together are. So x equals, and output x, and then on the next line we will say y equals, output y, and then z equals. Let's make a space there so it doesn't get confused. And then end line down here. So the way I have it spaced out over here, just to make my code look a little cleaner, I do that just for neatness. But let's go ahead and run this. And there you go. X equals 5 is set here, and y equals 7, and z equals the call to add function, which returns the value of x plus y, which is 12. So go ahead and subscribe, drop by the forums, sign up. We're always trying to build a community, and hope this video helped you guys understand a little bit more about computer programming.